When I was 7 years old, I often woke up in the middle of the night, especially during the winter months. The weather was cold, the wind whistled through the door cracks, and the wooden house my family lived in often creaked at night. One night, I woke up again. I heard a sound and saw a faint light coming from the hallway. I got out of bed, quickly threw on a jacket, and slowly walked out. Downstairs in the living room, the light from the TV cast a dim glow on the snow-covered carpet near the window. I was about to go down to turn off the TV when I was drawn to what was on the screen. It was an animated show I had never seen before. The two main characters, a blonde girl and a wide-eyed boy, were climbing into a glowing sleigh piloted by a Santa Claus-shaped robot. Together, they flew over fantastical places, from snow-covered pine forests to gingerbread villages and cities bright with Christmas lights. The background music was gentle, shimmering like distant bells. I sat down and was completely captivated by the show. I only turned off the TV when the program ended and quietly crept back to bed. From then on, I started waking up at that exact time every night. It was almost instinctive, and every night the TV was already on. No one else in the house knew. I felt like I had a small privilege to sneak watch this show. It felt like my own secret Christmas gift. But then, one night the program didn't end as usual. The colorful scene gradually became somber. The night sky covered the screen, and the sleigh slowed down, stopping in the middle of a forest blanketed in white snow. The main characters, the boy and the girl, turned to look at each other, their faces anxious. They both wanted to go home, but the Santa robot suddenly let out a delighted laugh. "You kids aren't allowed to go home." The screen went black, and the program ended. I was dazed for a few seconds before turning off the TV. I went to the bathroom before returning to my bedroom. When I came back, the TV was on again, but it was nothing but static, with a shrill, grating noise. A chill ran down my spine. I quickly turned it off and ran back to my room. The consecutive days of staying up late to watch TV left me feeling sluggish at school. I couldn't hear anything during class, only hoping for recess so I could slump onto my desk and sleep for a bit. One day, during recess at school, a girl I had never spoken to before pulled me aside. Her voice was unusually deep and serious. "The playground. You know that after 9 p.m. is the time of the dead? If you stay awake, they will find you." Before I could ask her anything, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing still in the middle of the schoolyard. That night, I woke up again. But it wasn't like the previous times. I felt like someone was pulling me awake. I walked out to the living room. The TV was on as always, but the familiar show was gone. There was only the chaotic static screen, the grating noise drilling into my ears. I walked over to turn it off, but as I turned my back, the static volume increased. The TV turned itself back on, and the image flickered rapidly. Then the main character boy from the show appeared. His eyes were no longer clear, nor his smile bright. He was inside an iron cage, his head bowed. Bang! He suddenly slammed forcefully against the inside of the screen. I screamed in surprise and backed away. He repeated the movement, each time more violently. Then he pressed his face close to the glass. "Let me out! Let me out! Do you hear me?" The screen showed static, then flashed back to show the boy's friend, the girl. She was also locked in an iron cage. The girl reached a hand toward me. "Hey, come here and let me go. Please." The very next second, her face stretched, becoming distorted. Her eyes were sunken and pitch black, and her mouth widened all the way to her ears. "You should be me! You should be in here instead of me!" I screamed, rushing up the stairs to the second floor. I ran to my parents' room and pounded on the door for help. But strangely, they slept soundly, not responding, even though I shook them until my arms were tired. Just as I was about to burst into tears, A laugh echoed from the living room. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I recognized it as the Santa robot's laugh. "Your turn, little one. I'm coming to get you." I ran back to my room, quickly hiding under the covers, trembling violently. I suddenly realized I was still clutching the remote control in my hand. A thought flashed through my panic. They appeared from the TV show, so all I needed to do was turn off the TV. I jumped up, pointed the remote toward the door. The moment the horrifying robot pushed the door open, I pressed the power button. In an instant, everything vanished. There was only my own ragged breathing. I curled up under the covers, motionless, until I was utterly exhausted and drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I told my parents everything. They just looked at each other and laughed. "You were sleepwalking last night. You were sitting in the living room giggling all by yourself." I didn't know what to say. If it was a dream, it was the most real, most terrifying dream I had ever experienced.
Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. MHS crossed over 10,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 50,000 in 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community. Let's grow this together. Now, back to the stories.
My name is Aliana. I'm 27 and I live in Chicago. Usually I don't believe in paranormal stuff or urban legends, but what happened last month, I honestly don't know how to explain it. I had to travel to Galena, Illinois for a 3-day business trip. Instead of booking a hotel, I rented a small house on Airbnb so I'd have a quiet place to work. Plus, I brought my dog Max along, and he needed a little space to run around. The house was vintage, with a classic old-school design, but everything seemed fine at first. The hardwood floors were polished, the furniture was neat, and the place smelled like scented candles. I had 0 complaints. On the first day, I took Max for a walk around the house to get him settled. Max is usually high energy and curious about everything, but this time was different. When I tried to lead him up to the second floor, he stopped dead at the bottom of the stairs. I gave his leash a gentle tug and called his name, even offering him his favorite treat, but he wouldn't budge. Max just stood there, staring intensely at a spot on the stairs. The hair on his neck was standing up, his nose was twitching, and he let out a low growl like he was warning me about something. I left Max downstairs and went up to check things out. I lifted the rug, knocked on the banister, and looked around, but I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Later that night, as I was walking around, I took a closer look at the house's layout. Right behind the stairs, there was a small door built into the wall. It was locked from the outside and looked like an entrance to a basement or a crawl space. What struck me as odd was that the light switch for that room was on the outside wall, and it was switched on. I knelt down and looked through the half-inch gap under the door. I could see a faint yellow light glowing from inside. I figured the owner just forgot to turn off the storage light, so I flipped it off and went to bed. But I couldn't stop thinking about how weird Max had been acting. The next morning, I decided to investigate a little more. I opened the camera on my phone, hit record, and slid it through the gap under the door to see what was inside. The video just showed a corner of a ceiling with dark wood. Nothing special. I tilted the phone back and forth, but the angle was too limited, so I pulled it back out. Right then, I heard a noise from behind the door. I jumped back, my eyes locked on the handle. It sounded like someone was turning the doorknob from the inside. They twisted it a few times, and then stopped completely. I immediately called the host. "I'm sorry to bother you, But is there anyone else in the house? Or is there another way into that storage room behind the stairs? That's just a storage area leading to the basement, she said. There's no other entrance, and I'm the only one with a key. Why do you ask? I told her what I'd heard. She insisted it was probably just the wind or old pipes. Sometimes the heating system makes weird noises. It's an old house, please don't worry about it. I thanked her and hung up, but I still felt uneasy. I called my best friend and told her the story. She suggested I try recording the inside one more time. I did exactly what I did before. I turned on the camera and slid the phone under the door. This time, I lightly knocked on the door 3 times to see if I'd get a reaction. Right after the 3rd knock, something with incredible force snatched the phone right out of my hand. It was pulled into the darkness so fast I didn't even have time to react. I screamed, and Max started barking like crazy. Once I stopped shaking, I used my work phone to call the host back. I frantically explained what happened. You need to come over here right now. My phone was pulled inside and I need to get it back. The host arrived about 20 minutes later. She unlocked the door, turned on a brighter light, and we walked in together. It was just a small room with steep wooden stairs leading down to a basement. The ceiling was low, the walls were bare brick, and it smelled damp and musty. My phone was lying face down on the 3rd step. I picked it up, and luckily, it wasn't broken. The screen was still on, and everything seemed to be working fine. I looked around one more time. There were just a few old cardboard boxes in the corner, and an old furnace. There were no secret exits and no windows. It would have been impossible for someone to be hiding down there. The host promised me again that there was nothing to worry about. We went back upstairs. I thanked her and she left. But I still felt sick to my stomach. I took my phone to my room, my heart still pounding. I opened the video I had just recorded. My heart practically stopped. The beginning of the video showed the blurry motion of the phone being jerked away. Then, it lay still on the steps for a moment. But then, the camera slowly began to rotate. It was slow and deliberate. It pointed straight up at the ceiling. Next, the phone stood up on its own. It looked as if an invisible hand was lifting it, holding the camera steady toward the door for several seconds. Finally, as if it had been hit by a heavy punch, the phone flipped backward and landed face down. The screen went black. I sat there frozen. My whole body went cold. I couldn't wrap my head around what I was seeing. In the video, the phone ended up with the camera facing down. That means when I picked it up, it should have been lying face up. But when I found it, it was face down again. Something had flipped it over after the recording ended. I didn't feel safe in that house for another second. Not knowing what was there was scarier than facing an actual intruder. Even though it was dark, I packed my bags, checked out early, and found a hotel. After I finished my trip and got back to Chicago, I shared the story and the video online. The post blew up. Some people believed it was a ghost or a spirit. Others thought there must be a hidden crawl space I missed. Some people accused me of faking the whole thing for views. I can't prove anything, and I don't have a logical explanation. But I know what I experienced. Max felt something that human eyes couldn't see, and my phone caught a glimpse of something that shouldn't be possible. Now, whenever I book an Airbnb, I do a deep dive into the reviews and the history of the place. And most importantly, I watch Max. I will never stay in a place with a locked door that leads to nowhere again. Inspired by a true story, in late 2023, Sydney, TikTok nickname Sid.Lane 2001, posted a video of herself and her sister staying at an Airbnb rental. There, her dog behaved strangely, refusing to go up the stairs and staring intently at a single spot. Sydney discovered a locked door behind the stairs with light leaking through the gap. When she reached in with her phone, the device was pulled inside, recording unusual movements before being slammed shut. The landlord then opened the door and retrieved the phone. The incident went viral, sparking debate over paranormal theories, hidden spaces, and staging. Living with someone you aren't close with is always a gamble. My name is Chester, and I'm 29. I shared a rental house in the suburbs with a roommate named Parker. We weren't really friends, we just paid rent together. Parker was a strange guy. He spent most of his time online, specifically in the dark corners of the internet that normal people never visit. It all started late one night. Parker was excited to show me a new dating site he found on the deep web. He called it a place for perfect soulmates based on very specific interests. When he turned his laptop screen toward me, I felt a cold chill run down my spine. The profiles on that site didn't use real names, only bizarre nicknames. Parker showed me a profile for someone named Petunia. When I read her bio, it made me feel sick. It said, "I need to be let inside. I can't stop scratching until the pain stops. The pain keeps the bad thoughts away." Her listed hobby? Listening to people chew. I told Parker that this was insane. I told him the photos didn't even look like a real person. But Parker just laughed, and his eyes looked wild with excitement. He muttered that Petunia was the most perfect girl in the world. That night, I discovered something terrible. Parker had used my photos to create a profile and flirt with Petunia. He claimed it was okay because I looked trustworthy and my photos were public anyway. I was furious and demanded he delete them immediately. He agreed, but the smirk on his face told me it was already too late. A few nights later, someone knocked on our door. It was well past midnight. I went to open it and froze. Standing there was a girl, if you could even call her that. She wore an old-fashioned dress and stood in an unnatural, crooked way. The dim porch light hit her pale, dry skin. I felt a powerful, uncanny valley sensation. She looked human, but every detail was wrong, from her slow, mechanical blinking to her stiff smile. "I'm here to see Chester," she said. Her voice was raspy, like sandpaper rubbing together. I went cold. "I'm Chester, but I don't know you." Right then, Parker rushed out of his room. He looked at her with pure lust and admitted he was the one messaging her. He eagerly invited her inside. As she walked in, her legs moved like her bones didn't fit together quite right. She whispered that she was very tired and wanted to be alone with Parker. Watching Parker lead her upstairs made me feel a deep sense of dread. I hated that my identity was being used for something so creepy. Once they were behind his bedroom door, I noticed her purse hanging on the coat rack. A bad feeling told me to check it. I reached inside and started looking through her things. At the bottom of the bag, I found a stack of IDs. There were at least 5 of them. They all had photos of different women with different names, but they all had one thing in common. They all looked slightly off, just like she did. I shivered and texted Parker. "There are a bunch of fake IDs in her bag. Something is wrong, get her out of here." He replied instantly and sounded very angry. "You're being stupid. Calm down and stop being rude to my girlfriend." I decided to go upstairs to have a serious talk with him. As I passed the shared bathroom in the hallway, I heard a strange noise. It was a cracking sound, like eggshells being crushed. It was followed by the sound of frantic, wet scratching. The bathroom door was slightly open. Through the crack and the reflection in the mirror, I saw Petunia. She wasn't the girl from before anymore. She was scratching her neck, and big pieces of dry skin were peeling off like onion layers. Underneath the skin wasn't red meat, but a gray, slimy material. Her jaw hung down way too far, opening all the way down to her chest. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Through the camera lens, the creature suddenly stopped. It didn't turn its head normally. Its neck twisted 180 degrees backward. Its eyes, pitch black with no pupils, looked right into the camera. It saw me. I dropped my phone, and my heart felt like it was going to explode. I ran back to my room, locked the door, and tried to catch my breath. I couldn't just sit there, so I gathered my courage and knocked on Parker's door. He opened it, and his face was red with rage. "Are you stalking her?" Parker yelled at me. "Parker, listen to me. She isn't human. I just saw her in the bathroom. She was peeling. She's a monster." Parker looked at me like I was a mental patient. He pointed to Petunia sitting on the bed. Now, she looked normal again. She looked at me with that stiff smile, gently scratching the back of her hand. "She's my girlfriend," Parker roared. "Accept her, or get out of this house right now. I'll call the cops if you keep filming her or stalking us." While Parker was screaming at me, I looked at Petunia behind him. She started to change again. Her shoulders hunched up high, and her ribs started poking through her thin dress. She opened her mouth and made a rhythmic clicking sound, just like the chewing interest in her profile. She looked at me with a mocking expression, as if to say, "He is mine, and you can't save him." Parker kept yelling ridiculous things about true love, completely blind to the monster that was slowly surrounding him from behind. I didn't wait until morning. I knew that if I stayed, her hobby of peeling skin or listening to chewing sounds would be used on me next. I grabbed my essentials, took my car keys, and ran out of the house while Parker was still screaming threats at me. I don't know what happened to Parker after that night, but I want to warn everyone, never touch the dark corners of the internet. Sometimes the thing you invite home is not a human being. I am still haunted by every detail of that night, a cold, windy evening 10 years ago. At that time, we were just mischievous 12-year-olds. Me, Sam, Lisa, and Matt. Before that, we had one more member, Max. Speaking of Max, he was once my close neighbor, but disappeared one rainy day without a trace. The police searched everywhere, but the case went cold. A year had passed since Max's disappearance, and Sam was the one who sparked the idea of exploring the mysterious house of Mrs. Martha, the woman who lived alone at the end of the street. People said she had lived there for many years and knew how to use incantations. Those rumors became the inspiration for us to prove that it was all nonsense. But there was more to it than just curiosity. I remember Max once told me that Mrs. Martha had stared at him for a long time from the window when he passed by her house. Since then, I couldn't stop thinking, could she be connected to Max's disappearance? I immediately agreed when I heard the suggestion from Sam, Lisa, and Matt, though I reluctantly followed. That night, Mrs. Martha's house loomed like a ghost in the dark. The wooden walls were rotting, the windows covered with dark fabric, and an eerie silence hung in the air, causing us to hesitate. Sam quietly opened a basement window at the side of the house, and the group crept inside. Inside, it was pitch black, and the air was heavy as if no one had lived there for many years. The air was thick, and every step echoed eerily. Black and white photos hung on the walls, but they were all faded and hard to make out. On a shelf, I saw strange jars filled with dark liquid, each etched with the name of a child. My hand trembled as I touched the jar with Max written on it. In a small room at the end of the second-floor hallway, I found something that shattered all my doubts. A wooden toy ship, the gift I had given Max for his 5th birthday. Around it were other toys I recognized as children's belongings. My heart tightened, and a flood of questions overwhelmed me. Lisa entered, her eyes wide with panic. "We should go," she whispered. "No," Sam said. "We need to find more. She's definitely hiding more terrifying things." Suddenly, a raspy laugh echoed from behind. "Get out of here," she said, her voice seeming to come from somewhere far away, although she was standing right in front of us. We panicked. Sam shouted, "Run!" and the whole group rushed out of the room. Behind us, Mrs. Martha's slow footsteps drew nearer and nearer. Sam grabbed the door handle and yanked it, but it was useless, and he screamed in despair. "She's coming!" Lisa screamed, her eyes locked on the dark figure moving closer. In the chaos, Sam turned and ran straight for the window, yelling loudly and jumping out. I ran to him, only hearing the sound of glass shattering. When I looked down, I saw Sam's lifeless body on the ground, blood spilling around him. "The secret is not for the curious," Mrs. Martha's voice echoed again. The sound of footsteps pounding through the dark hallway made my panic worsen. I had no choice but to run, not caring about direction, and then thud. I stepped on a loose floorboard, and beneath it was a dark, narrow space, just wide enough for someone to crawl through. "Here! There's a way out!" I shouted, my voice hoarse with fear. The group immediately rushed to me. Matt and I struggled to lift the floorboard, but it was stuck as if something underneath was holding it in place. Matt quickly searched for something to pry it loose. Matt fumbled around in the dark room and found an old oil lamp on a shelf. With a bit of light, we quickly took turns pushing and prying. As we struggled with the board, we heard footsteps coming from the stairs. That voice wasn't loud, but it reverberated throughout the house, as if coming from every corner. The raspy voice was like a curse. "Don't think you can escape. The darkness will keep you forever." My head spun. Lisa began to sob uncontrollably, clutching my hand, while Matt froze, his hands trembling around the oil lamp. I used all my strength to kick at the board. Finally, the board popped up, revealing a narrow, dark tunnel below. A gust of cold air rushed up from the hole, carrying the smell of damp earth and decay. I pushed Lisa through first. She trembled, shaking her head, but there was no time for hesitation. Matt shoved Lisa down right after, and then I followed. Just then, I heard Mrs. Martha's footsteps coming toward us. Her steps were slow, but they sent a chill down my spine. I turned one last time. Mrs. Martha was getting closer, but she wasn't walking. She seemed to glide across the floor, without a sound. Her eyes fixed on me, and her mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. I didn't hesitate for a second, diving into the passage and pulling the board back into place. Darkness engulfed everything. There was no light, no sound except for our heavy breathing. The passage was narrow and low, forcing us to crouch down to move. Mrs. Martha's footsteps above us still echoed, though faint. It was like the slow, heavy beat of a heart, slow but relentless. I dared not look back, only pushing myself to move faster. We kept going, and then, after what felt like an eternity, a faint light appeared ahead. I felt as though I hadn't breathed in hours. When we crawled out of the tunnel, we found ourselves behind the house near some thick bushes. The sky outside was still dark, but the moonlight faintly illuminated the path ahead. In that moment, running into the darkness was the only safe and viable option. The people who would surely come next were our parents and the police. The police concluded that Sam died from multiple injuries. The sight of Sam lying motionless on the ground haunted me so much that every breath felt stuck in my chest. Lisa collapsed, clutching her head, her sobs blending with broken, fragmented words. Matt stood frozen, his vacant stare locked on the bloodstain below the window, his hands trembling as if trying to hold on to something invisible, to keep from falling apart. After several months of continuous investigation, the police finally uncovered the truth when they found Mrs. Martha hiding in an abandoned house several dozen miles from the town. They discovered horrifying evidence linking her to several child disappearances, including toys, clothes, and detailed journals documenting her targets. Mrs. Martha confessed that she carried out these acts due to a warped belief in an ancient ritual, sacrificing children to extend her life. According to her, the dark jars with each child's name weren't just symbols, they were part of a ritual to lock the children's souls into eternal darkness. Although the police dismissed the supernatural elements of her confession, they couldn't explain certain strange occurrences, like the disappearance of the jars or items mysteriously showing up in the homes of the victims. Mrs. Martha was sentenced to life in prison, but her story continued to haunt the town for many years. I, Lisa, and Matt, the lucky ones who survived, carried with us psychological scars that were hard to heal. I still can't forget her deep, haunting gaze that night. I'm Claire, a 22-year-old senior at Kent State. Back in my second semester of freshman year, I babysat in the evenings to make some extra cash. That ended up being both my first and last part-time job, because it was straight up traumatic. This happened 3 winters ago. The Smith's house sits in a quiet neighborhood out in the Ohio suburbs. The roof was covered in snow, and the warm yellow glow from the windows made it look super cozy. Inside, their 2-story house felt homey. The furniture was all neatly arranged, family photos lined the walls, and the wooden floors had this nice shine to them. I was looking after Max, their 3-year-old son, who was happily playing with his favorite teddy bear, his little eyes full of curiosity. I spent the evening taking care of him, feeding him, telling him stories, and putting him to bed. Max's room was small but cozy, the nightlight taking the edge off the cold outside. As he drifted off, clutching his teddy bear, I checked the baby monitor to make sure I had a clear view, then headed back to the living room. Curled up on the sofa with a book, I enjoyed the peaceful moment of a winter night. Around 1 a.m., I was startled by a rustling sound coming from the monitor. The noise was small but clear, like the sound of clothes rubbing together or someone moving in Max's room. As I stared at the screen, a chill ran down my spine. Max wasn't in his crib anymore. The boy stood in the middle of the room, his small frame motionless. His eyes were empty, devoid of emotion, staring directly at the camera as if he were watching me through the screen. My heart pounded. Max was only 3 years old. How could he climb out of the crib that high? I told myself it could be a device malfunction, but the image was too real to be just a technical issue. Grabbing the baby monitor, I headed upstairs. The wooden floor creaked under me, and with every step, the air felt colder. When I pushed open Max's door, I just stood there, stunned. He was still sound asleep in his crib. I glanced back at the monitor. Max's creepy, motionless figure was gone. Now, it just showed him peacefully sleeping. I scanned the room, everything looking normal, except for one small thing. His teddy bear, the one he'd been holding, was now on the floor a few steps from the crib. I picked it up, placed it back in Max's hand, and tried to shake off the unease. Maybe the boy dropped the teddy bear while sleeping. But why was it so far away? Back in the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The cold sank into my skin, making my heart race. That eerie image of Max standing frozen in the middle of the room wouldn't leave my mind. About half an hour later, as I tried to relax, a loud noise came from upstairs. A child's giggles, mixed with light but hurried footsteps, as if Max were running around the room. I quickly walked up the stairs and opened Max's door. He was still lying there, fast asleep. But the window was wide open, and the cold wind blew in, making the curtains flutter. In a panic, I looked back at the monitor. The light from the camera flickered, and then suddenly, a blurry figure crossed the frame. It was taller than a child, moving so fast that I couldn't see it clearly. The next morning, I told Mrs. Smith, Max's mother, everything. She listened but seemed uneasy, her eyes awkward, and her forced smile made me feel like she wasn't too surprised. She said that Max had talked about a friend who played with him at night. This friend didn't like strangers, especially me. A chill ran through me, but Miss Smith just gave an awkward smile and said kids have wild imaginations. Then she mentioned hearing footsteps at night or finding windows open for no reason. Mrs. Smith revealed a detail that made my skin crawl. The house was built on the grounds of an old mental asylum that was demolished in the 1970s. The locals whispered that the land had issues, but the Smith family didn't believe in ghost stories. They stayed because they had never encountered anything truly dangerous, at least not until now. After that night, I decided to quit. Nothing dangerous happened, but that creepy feeling never left me, and I just couldn't do the job anymore. The Smith family decided to move a few months later. One day, when I happened to run into them in town, Mrs. Smith said that Max still talked about his friend. He said the friend was sad he left. Sometimes, Max even said he saw the friend standing outside the window, watching him. I still don't know what really happened that night, but every time I think back, I can't shake the feeling that someone's still watching me from the shadows. The cold, Max's empty eyes, and the blurry figure on the baby monitor, they still haunt me to this day. I quit my security guard job 3 years ago, but the memory of that night still haunts me. Every time I see a no signal on a screen, my heart starts pounding. In 2019, I was working the night shift as a security guard at Walmart. After 2 years on the job, I knew every nook and cranny of that place. That night, I was sitting in the security room, drinking coffee and watching NBA on my phone. The clock had just struck 2 a.m. when a loud crash echoed from somewhere in the building. It sounded like someone had knocked over a whole shelf. I immediately switched to the CCTV screens. Images from many CCTV displayed on 6 screens, covering everything from the main entrance to the hallways, from the central lobby to each individual department. I checked each angle, zooming in on areas where something might have happened. Nothing. Everything was silent. I grabbed my flashlight and keys and started patrolling from the ground floor. I meticulously checked each department. After about an hour of patrolling, finding nothing unusual, I returned to the security room. Maybe it was just a stray cat knocking over a trash can outside. I sat down, intending to go back to my phone, when I suddenly noticed something strange on CCTV number 8, which covered the best electronics department on the 2nd floor. A faint, bluish light, like the glow from a TV screen. I zoomed in on that CCTV. Yes, there was definitely something glowing inside the store, but how could that be? I had just checked that store, and everything was off. I quickly grabbed my flashlight and keys to head back to the 2nd floor. The 2nd floor hallway was darker than the ground floor, with only a few emergency lights illuminating it. As I approached Best Electronics, I clearly saw the blue light from inside. I unlocked the door and stepped in. The scene inside stunned me. In the middle of the store, in front of a flat-screen TV, stood 2 people, an elderly man and an elderly woman. They stood close together, staring intently at the screen. "Excuse me, what are you 2 doing here?" I said loudly. The woman turned to look at me. Her face was wrinkled, and she offered a gentle smile with calm eyes. "This is the only program that makes him happy." I looked over at the man. He was still staring straight at the screen, unmoving. My hand unconsciously tightened its grip on the flashlight. "How did you get in here?" "We closed at 11 p.m. "We just need to watch a little longer. He really likes this show," the woman said. A chill ran down my spine from the way she spoke. The man hadn't moved or said a word since I entered. I started to wonder if he was even alive. That thought made me want to run immediately. "I have to report this. You 2 need to come out with me." My voice was stiff, trying to hide the rising panic. "Just 5 more minutes. Please, I'll call the police if you don't cooperate." I pulled out my walkie-talkie, my hand trembling as I pressed the button to call the night supervisor. While calling, I didn't dare take my eyes off the 2 people. "Jake, I've got 2 intruders in Best Electronics on the 2nd floor. Need backup and call the police." "Roger, keep them there. I'm calling the police now." When I hung up and turned back, the 2 people were gone. I stood frozen. I had only looked down at the walkie-talkie for a second to hang up. How could they disappear so quickly? I shined my flashlight around the entire store, my hands shaking uncontrollably. My breathing became rapid, as if there wasn't enough oxygen in my lungs. I shined my flashlight all over the store. No one. I checked the storage room in the back, the employee restroom, all empty. The TV was still on, displaying a blue screen. The police arrived. They searched the entire building, but found no one. There were no signs of forced entry at any of the entrances. All the doors were still locked, and the alarm system was functioning normally. "Are you sure you saw them?" the police officer asked me with skepticism. I understood immediately. He thought I was hallucinating. "Absolutely sure. They were standing right in front of that TV. They asked to review the CCTV footage. We sat in the security room, replaying the recording from 3 a.m. On the screen, I saw myself opening the door to Best Electronics and stepping inside. I stood in the store, shining my flashlight everywhere. And I was talking to thin air. I froze, feeling like I was going crazy. In the CCTV footage, the store was completely empty. It was just me standing alone, talking to the darkness. But I swear with a God that I saw those two people. I still vividly remember that woman's voice and her eyes. The police examined the CCTV footage until morning. On the screen, the TV was indeed on, emitting a blue light. But no one else was visible besides me. I worked for 3 more months, then quit. Not because I was afraid, but because I couldn't focus anymore. Every night on patrol, I would stop by Best Electronics. The TV was always off, the store always empty. But sometimes I still felt like someone was watching me from inside. 6 months later, I read that Best Electronics had closed down. The reason, low revenue and unexplained technical incidents. They said the electronic devices in the department would often turn on by themselves at night, especially the large flat-screen TV. That department is now a bakery, but I never dare go in. Some nights when I drive by, I still see the dim light from inside. It's as if the old couple is still standing there, watching their favorite show on a non-existent screen.
I'm Steven. I live in Houston. Just signed the papers to pay for a car with my tiny office salary. Not trying to brag or anything, but it's a horror story that made me swear off public transportation for good. That night, on the last bus from work to my place, I grabbed the seat in the back row. It was just me, some girl, and the driver on the bus at that point. I leaned back, shut my eyes, and just tried to relax. It took me almost an hour to get home. The girl, annoyed, told the driver, "You can skip the empty stops, it'll save time. I gotta be home in 15 minutes. I noticed she looked like she was still in school. With all that heavy makeup and colorful clothes, she probably just came from a party. The driver replied slowly, "Chill, girl, I'm just following the rules. But your rules ain't gonna help me dodge my parents finding out." The driver laughed and was like, "This last bus ain't just for people. It's got other stuff too." That caught me off guard a bit. The girl rolled her eyes, plopped back in her seat, and started scrolling on her phone. I closed my eyes, leaned back, and tried to rest. I was exhausted, but I just couldn't fall asleep. A while later, when the bus stopped, a cold wind hit, and it made me shiver. I looked around and realized I was the only one on the bus. No one got on the bus at this stop. I zipped up my jacket, shoved my hands in my pockets, and curled up. "Why is it so cold?" I mumbled. I checked the clock and it was already past 11. Just about 30 minutes till I got home. I pulled out the book I was reading to kill some time. I turned the page, then looked up by accident and saw a girl sitting near the door in a red sweater with long, messy brown hair. Clearly, that girl wasn't there a minute ago. I looked out at the street and there was no bus stop around here.
When did she even get on? No way. This can't be the high school girl who just ran away from home. Whatever. I went back to reading. The second time I looked up, it kind of seemed like the girl was sitting closer to me, but I wasn't sure. She was sitting up straight and didn't seem to budge. I kept reading, but I couldn't focus. The air in the bus was getting colder, and I started shivering. After a few minutes of trying to focus, I looked up at the girl in the red shirt again. She was sitting way closer to me, like just 2 rows away. My heart started racing, and I felt this weird shortness of breath. I tried to shake off the bad thoughts by keeping on reading, gripping the book tight. The light on the page faded, and a dark shadow took over. That girl, she was right in front of me, but she moved without making a sound. I started gasping and slowly looked up. She was still sitting up straight, but the sweater wasn't red. It was soaked in some red stuff that smelled fishy. Before I could even react, the girl gently pushed her hair back with both hands. She pushed her hair back, and behind it, a messed up face stared at me, and she started giggling. I just mumbled some sounds, took a few more seconds, then finally screamed, letting all the horror out. When I ran out of breath, I took another one and screamed again. I kept doing that until something hard smacked my head. "What's wrong with you?" I opened my eyes, and it was that girl from earlier, holding a school bag. She was staring at me like she was judging me. I was freaking out, looking all around the bus like, "The girl in red, the girl with long hair," I kept saying it, about to lose it. I bolted off the bus, stood at the stop, and gasped for air. The bus took off, and in my seat, I saw the back of a girl in red, sitting up straight. I couldn't take anymore and just collapsed, trying to figure out where I was. It was a stop close to my place, so I jumped up and ran home, my hands shaking as I tried to open the door. I never went near that bus stop again, and I never told anyone about that creepy experience. No one would believe this, but I'm sure the stuff I felt was real as heck. I am Wade, 29 years old. I just quit my job at my old company because I didn't see myself growing there, and I wanted something more. After taking some time off and looking for a new gig, I was happy to pick between 2 companies in Florida. I love this state because I get to travel around here and visit family. The weather in Florida always makes me feel comfy and good vibes. The 2 companies I interviewed with were pretty good, and I was really excited about the chance to live and work in Florida. My finances weren't great at the time, so I decided to drive to Florida on my own for the interview. Time was tight, so I drove through the night to get to Florida in the morning and hit the interview that afternoon. I threw on a podcast story and swapped out the car's air freshener. Kicking things off with a positive vibe made me feel chill, not scared of the dark or the empty highway. All I could see on the road was my car's headlights cutting through the mist and the trees swaying in the shadows. A few hours later, I saw a guy on the side of the road, driving the same way I was. He was dressed in all black, just standing there next to his car that was turned off. The light was pretty low, so I couldn't make out his face. As I got closer, I felt like he was staring at me. In that moment, I thought about stopping to see if he was okay. But then, my actions didn't match my thoughts, and I just hit the gas and drove straight ahead. About 10 minutes later, I saw another guy standing there by himself. This guy didn't have any other cars around him. I thought something had happened to him, so I decided to pull over. When the car stopped and I turned to look, he was gone. My heart skipped a beat, and I looked around, trying to figure out where he went. There was a little trail nearby, heading into the dark woods. Could he have run into it? But why so fast? I started getting more suspicious about the guy in the black suit, feeling freaked out, so I just took off. I tried to calm myself down, but the image of the guy in the black suit kept popping into my head. I decided to stop at a Denny's for a break, thinking some food and a rest would make me feel better. I was enjoying my sandwich when my eyes drifted to the window, and suddenly, I got chills all over. The guy in the black suit was standing outside, staring right at me. He just stood there, silent and still, with those dark, empty eyes staring through the glass. I felt my blood run cold, and my breathing got heavy. I couldn't sit there any longer, so I grabbed my coffee, rushed out of the shop, and hustled to my car. I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking as I shoved the key in the ignition and hit the gas, speeding out of the parking lot. I drove for a few more hours and didn't see any more guys. Slowly, I started to feel a lot better. Maybe it was just a coincidence, and I was overthinking it. But when I accidentally glanced at the rearview mirror, I almost stopped breathing. The guy in the black suit was sitting in the back seat of my car. My heart was pounding. I screamed in panic and hit the gas. The car shot forward. I almost lost control, fumbling and freaking out trying to find the brake. I jumped out of the car, yanked open the back door, but there was no one there. The guy was gone, like he'd never been there. I looked around, scanning the quiet night, but all I could hear was the wind whistling through the trees. I felt like I was losing it, not able to make sense of what was going on. Scared and freaked out, I decided to drive to a nearby motel to crash for the night. I needed to calm down, just a safe place to think it all through. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every little sound freaked me out. I just wanted morning to come fast so I could get out of there. The next morning, I left the motel super early, drove straight to the city, and stayed away from all the empty roads. When I got to my first interview, I still felt pretty anxious. I walked into the room, and my heart nearly stopped when I saw the recruiter. He, the guy sitting in front of me, had the exact same face as the guy in the black suit I'd seen on the street. I was frozen, barely able to believe what I was seeing. Fear hit me hard, and I couldn't focus on the interview. My mind went blank, and my words came out all messed up. I totally bombed that interview. But more than anything, I felt like I was losing it. I was totally confused, not getting what was happening to me. I tried to chill out before the second interview. This time, there was no weird guy like that, so I was able to do better. Now I'm all about working on myself and my career, living the life I wanted in Florida. Little by little, I convinced myself it was all just a coincidence. Maybe I was just so stressed and anxious about the interview that I fixated on the guy in the black suit. A few days ago, I read an article about the company I bombed the interview for going bankrupt, where the recruiter had a face just like that mysterious guy I saw on the highway. The company had been dodging taxes for years and finally got busted, going bankrupt. The recruiter, Mark, was arrested for harassing women, and according to the police, it wasn't his first offense. But at night, when I'm sitting alone, I still can't help but wonder, was it really all in my head, or was there some kind of miracle that helped me dodge the danger? I'm Megan, 26 years old, and what happened that night by the lake near Blue Mountain changed me forever. Samson, my friend from college, suggested going camping near Blue Mountain National Park. He said it was the perfect place to reset our minds. Jordan, our best friend, also agreed to join. All three of us needed some time away from daily life, deadlines, and stressful relationships. I hadn't been camping since I was little, but wasn't too worried because Samson was experienced. He had picked a perfect spot, a small clearing next to a quiet lake, a few miles from the main campsites. When we arrived, sunset was gradually falling, dyeing the whole forest in an ethereal orange hue. "Hey, are you sure we're allowed to camp here?" I asked as we started setting up the tents. Samson chuckled lightly. "There aren't any no camping signs, right? Besides, this is public land just outside the park boundary." Jordan nodded in agreement. "I like this quietness. No tourists or noise, just us and nature." A fleeting sense of unease passed through me as I looked down at the still surface of the lake, but I quickly pushed the thought away. We finished setting up the two tents, one for Samson and Jordan, one for me. I always liked having my own space, even on trips like this. Afterwards, we started a campfire, opened beers, and began grilling meat. The atmosphere was really pleasant. For the first time in months, I felt the stress slowly melting away. Jordan connected his phone to a Bluetooth speaker and turned on some music. The gentle acoustic music blended with the sound of the wind through the leaves and the soft lapping of water against the shore. We sat around the fire, sharing old stories, reminiscing about college, and laughing about silly memories. In that moment, everything was perfect. Until Samson suddenly stopped mid-story and turned off the music. "Hey, what are you doing?" Jordan asked, slightly annoyed. Samson didn't answer. He stared intently towards the lake, his body tense. I followed his gaze, but saw nothing but thick darkness and the moonlight reflecting on the water. "Sam?" I asked softly. "Do you guys hear that?" He whispered, his eyes still fixed on the lake. I listened. At first, nothing but the crackling fire and the sound of insects. But then there was a sound, very faint, as if the water was being gently disturbed. "Something's in the water," Samson said, his voice tense. Jordan chuckled. "Probably just fish, Sam." But Samson shook his head. "No, much bigger. Sounds like someone walking in the water." A chill ran down my spine. "Let me see," I said, taking the flashlight out of my bag and shining it towards the lake. My flashlight beam swept across the water's surface, but I saw nothing unusual. The lake remained still, only a few small ripples created by the wind. But then, as I moved the beam further out, I thought I saw a larger ripple, as if something had just submerged. "See anything?" Samson asked, his voice strained. I didn't want to freak everyone out, so I shook my head. "No, nothing." But then we heard it again. The sound of displaced water, as if someone or something was moving underwater, and it was heading towards us. "We should get in the tents," Jordan suggested, his joking expression gone. Samson nodded. We extinguished the campfire and packed up our things. No one said anything, but I could feel the tension. Inside the tent, I tried to sleep, but couldn't. I couldn't stop thinking about what we had just witnessed. About an hour later, as I finally started drifting off, I heard a new sound. Footsteps. At first, it was distant, but grew louder, closer, heavy, and slow. Not the sound of an animal. These were human footsteps, but the footsteps were squishy, as if the person had just emerged from the water. I lay there, motionless, heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps drew closer to my tent. In a panic, I took out my phone and texted Samson. "Do you hear that?" I typed, my hands shaking so badly it was hard to type correctly. I waited, but no reply. The footsteps continued. "Sam, something's getting close to my tent." I texted again, feeling cold sweat run down my back. Still no reply. The footsteps stopped, right outside my tent. I held my breath. My heart was beating so hard I was sure whatever was out there could hear it. Then I heard breathing. I texted Samson again. "It's right outside my Before I could finish sending the message, it happened. A terrifying scream pierced the night. It lasted about 5 seconds, then fell silent. I lay there, frozen with fear. A silence even scarier than the scream. My phone vibrated. A message from Samson. "Get to the car now." Without thinking, I crawled out of my sleeping bag and unzipped the tent. I quickly scrambled out of the tent and ran straight towards the car parked about 200 yards away, not daring to look back. Finally, I reached the car. Samson and Jordan were already inside, their faces pale with fear. "Hurry up!" Samson yelled as I dove into the back seat. He started the car and sped off, tires kicking up mud as we left the campsite. "What happened?" I asked, still breathing heavily. Samson and Jordan looked at each other, fear evident in their eyes. "I don't know. We heard noises outside the tent. Then that scream," Jordan gasped out. "Did you see anything?" Samson asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. I shook my head. It was right outside my tent, but I didn't see it. We drove to a nearby gas station and decided to sleep in the car overnight. The next morning, after an almost sleepless night, we decided to go back for our gear. In the daylight, the fear lessened slightly. When we got there, everything was still intact. Both tents were still standing, no signs of disturbance. Our stuff was still there. "Maybe we just panicked," Jordan said, trying a weak laugh. But Samson wasn't laughing. He was looking towards the lake, his expression serious. "Do you guys see that?" he asked, pointing down at the lake shore. I followed his finger and felt my blood run cold. Footprints leading from the lake onto the shore, large footprints leading straight to our campsite, meandering between the tents, then returning to the lake. We quickly gathered our belongings and left, not daring to look back. On the way home, no one spoke. Each of us lost in our own thoughts, trying to understand what had happened. But there was no logical explanation. When I got home, I researched the Blue Mountain area and the lake. There wasn't much information, but I found an old newspaper article from 1978 about a couple who went missing in that area. They had gone camping and never returned. Their car was found next to the lake, but there were no suspicious signs. The police concluded they might have drowned, but the bodies were never found, and that wasn't the only case. Over the years, several people had gone missing in that area. A week after the trip, Samson called me. He had researched the lake further and discovered it wasn't marked on most maps. It had no official name, but locals called it Dead Man's Pond. According to local legend, the lake was much deeper than it looked, and the thing living at the bottom sometimes came ashore at night. I've never gone back to Blue Mountain, nor have I gone camping again. I don't know what we encountered that night, but it hurt us, and I always wonder if it's looking for us. But there's one more thing I've never told Samson or Jordan. That night, before we finally left the campsite, I looked back towards the lake, and in the dim moonlight, I thought I saw a figure standing by the water's edge, watching us. It had a human shape, but it wasn't human. It was taller, thinner, with long, slender limbs. That was the last thing I saw before we sped away, and that's the image that haunts me every night when I close my eyes. My name's Alex. Josh and Tyler, they've been best buds since college. The three of us are pretty outdoorsy. We love getting out in nature. Every now and then, we ditch the city for quick 2-day camping trips out in the woods. Last time, we headed out on a Saturday morning in July, each with a backpack loaded with gear. The plan? Hit 2 different campsites, one night at each. The first spot was about 2 miles off the main trail, tucked near a little stream. We made it there around 3 p.m. I dropped my pack and took a look around. Josh was already pulling his tent out, and Tyler was off gathering dry wood for the fire. "This place is perfect," Josh said while setting up. I nodded and started unpacking my stuff. The sun was already dipping low, and Tyler was stacking up kindling for a small fire. We kicked back, grilled some sausages, cracked open a few beers, and just let the stress from the week fade away. Then, around 8, something rustled in the bushes behind us. We all turned. Some guy stepped out. Gray, messy hair, unshaven beard. Looked like he hadn't seen a shower in a while. "Hey guys," he said. "Saw your fire and thought I'd come over." Josh glanced at me, then at Tyler. None of us said anything, but yeah, the vibe got weird fast. I asked, "Hey, you camping out here too?" The guy gave us this weird little smile. "You could say that. I've been out here a long time." He just stood there, eyes locked on the fire. That's when I noticed. His hands were shaking. "You okay?" "You look cold," Tyler asked. "Cold? Nah, I'm not cold anymore." That sent a chill down my spine. Josh got up real casual-like, said he was going to grab more firewood. "Mind if I stay here with you?" We all froze. No one said a word. A few seconds passed, but it felt way longer. And then he started humming. Some weird, wordless tune made my skin crawl. It wasn't like a song, more like a low moan, like someone hurting but trying to hold it in. Josh tried to play it cool. Yeah, well, we were just about to hit the sack. Gotta be up early tomorrow. The guy stopped humming, slowly turned his head toward Josh. I'm always here, even when you think I'm not. Then, he just turned around and walked straight into the dark. Gone. We sat there for a few minutes, dead quiet. What the hell was that? Tyler whispered. Maybe he's just lost, Josh muttered, but even he didn't sound convinced. We put the fire out and got in the tent way earlier than planned. I was lying in my sleeping bag, wide awake, listening to every damn sound outside. Eventually, I must have passed out. Next morning, we packed up and made our way to the second campsite. On the way, we swung by the ranger station to grab some water and snacks. While Josh and Tyler were inside picking out food, I stepped out for a smoke. A big old bulletin board covered in missing person flyers. Most of them were sun-bleached and curling at the corners, but one stood out. The face on it made my stomach drop. Thomas Gray, 58, missing since last September. May have mental health issues, last seen in this area. It was him, the guy from last night, no doubt in my mind. I called Josh and Tyler out. As soon as they saw the flyer, the color drained from their faces. We called the number on the flyer. Cops said they'd send someone out to check the area. Thanked us for the heads up. They told us to be careful, report back if we saw him again. Josh looked at me. Should we just head home? I shook my head. I mean, yeah, he's got issues, but he didn't seem dangerous. So we kept going. The second campsite was a good 5 miles out, way more remote, pretty much off the grid. We pitched our tent by this small lake. The afternoon went by like any other. We fished a bit, cooked some dinner, played cards, just hanging out. But once the sun went down, the vibe shifted. Around midnight, I jolted awake. That humming sound was back. Same weird tune from the night before, except this time, it was clearer, closer. It echoed all around our tent, like it was circling us. Josh sat up and grabbed my arm. Did you hear that? Tyler was awake too. We just laid there listening. The humming would stop, then start up again. It's him, I whispered. How the hell does he know where we are? Beats me! I reached for my phone to call the cops. No signal. That creepy hum kept going all night. None of us slept a wink. By morning, we were done. No way we were staying another minute. As we packed up, I noticed something. Footprints, all around our tent. We didn't waste any more time, just grabbed our stuff and hit the trail back to the car. We were about a mile out when we heard it, a loud shout from behind us. Alex, Josh, Tyler. It was his voice, clear as day, calling each of us by name. We stopped dead in our tracks, turned around, and there he was. He was waving at us like we were old friends. Huge grin on his face, like he was thrilled to see us. We ran, full sprint, no looking back, until we spotted the car, dove in, and fired up the engine. Josh gunned it down the mountain like a bat out of hell. How the hell did he know our names? Tyler asked, still catching his breath. No one answered. When we got home, we called the cops again and told them everything. About a week later, they found Thomas, but not alive. They found pieces of him in a deep cave. The medical examiner said he'd been dead for several days. Could have been the weather, could have been animals, or maybe something got to him before all that. We never went camping again after that. Sometimes Josh brings it up, says maybe we were just freaked out, tired, paranoid. Maybe we imagined stuff. But me? That one question still keeps me up at night. How the hell did he know our names?
My name is Melvin, and I'm 21 years old. I left the town of Millfield a long time ago, and I have no plans to ever go back. There are things that happened there that I just can't forget, no matter how much time passes. When I was 7, my dad and I lived in a small house in a very remote part of Millfield. Isolation was just a way of life there. To get to our house, you had to take a long, winding dirt trail through dense trees. It was so narrow that the school bus couldn't get back there. Because of that, I had to walk over 2 miles down that trail every single day to get to school. Everything started to change on a chilly morning in late September. That morning was like any other. I put on my backpack and left early to catch the bus. The mist was still hanging low, the trees were damp, and the air had a bite to it. I walked along the familiar path, still half asleep and groggy. When I hit a sharp bend in the trail, I froze. There was an old, beat-up silver Toyota parked right in the middle of the path. I stood there for a few seconds, totally confused. This road was narrow and rugged. Nobody ever drove back here. I had never seen a car in this spot before. I crept a little closer to take a look. Inside the car, a woman was sitting perfectly still in the driver's seat. What creeped me out was that she didn't react at all. She just sat there, staring blankly at me. I felt a pit in my stomach, so I quickly stepped into the grass to walk around the car. As I tried to pass, she slowly turned her head to follow me. Her gaze stayed locked on my back, cold and sharp, until I finally broke into a run and reached the edge of town. When I got home that afternoon, I told my dad about it. His face went pale. He looked at me and said firmly, "Melvin, nobody just gets lost on that road." Starting the very next day, Dad began driving me to school and picking me up. The woman didn't show up again. Eventually, I started to think it was just a weird, one-time thing. After a week of seeing no sign of her, I told my dad I could handle walking to school on my own again. But that very afternoon, the car was back. This time, I didn't stop to look. I veered off and tried to circle around the trail through the edge of the woods. Suddenly, I heard the car door fly open and the sound of footsteps sprinting toward me. I immediately bolted. "Melvin!" The scream was high-pitched and tore through the quiet air. I went numb. How did she know my name? Pure terror turned into survival instinct. I ran through the trees like a hunted animal. Since I knew every inch of those woods, I managed to lose her by a dry creek bed and sprinted all the way home. I slammed the door behind me, gasping for air. My dad rushed out when he heard the noise. He looked terrified when he saw the state I was in. It took me a while to get the words out, but I finally told him everything, especially the part where she called out my name. My dad went into a state of shock. He looked like he aged 10 years in a matter of hours. Finally, he decided to tell me the truth he had been hiding for 7 years. He told me the woman I saw was most likely my mother, Marissa. I sat there, stunned. In my entire life, I had never heard my dad mention my mother. I had no idea who she was, no photos, no stories, nothing. That explained that she suffered from severe schizophrenia. She loved me in a way that was terrifying and distorted. In her episodes, she believed this world was too dark for me. She thought the only way to protect me was to take me with her to the afterlife. She had tried to take me away one stormy night years ago, and it almost ended in tragedy before my dad stopped her. When she was committed to a mental hospital back then, she screamed a vow. "I'll come back for him." After hearing the story, I just sat there in silence. My mind was a mess. I kept picturing that woman, a mother who was both heartbreaking and horrifying, someone I never truly knew. From that night on, our house became a fortress. My dad kept a gun by the door, and the police patrolled the area more often. But she was smart. She never showed her face when an adult was around. One night, during a light rain, I woke up to a steady tapping on my second-story window. I trembling as I pulled back the curtain. The woman was standing right there on the narrow ledge outside my bedroom window. The rain had matted her hair down, making her thin face look like a skull. For the first time, I was face to face with my mother, with only a pane of glass between us. She didn't try to break in. She just pressed her thin hand against the glass, stroking the spot where my face was. Her eyes were cloudy, but they were filled with a twisted kind of love. Her lips moved, whispering my name over and over, gesturing for me to come into her arms. I screamed for my dad. By the time he burst into the room with his gun, she had jumped down from the ledge and vanished into the pitch-black night as if she had never been there at all. My mother was caught a few days later. The police issued a permanent restraining order and moved her to a high-security treatment facility for good. My family left Millfield that very night, running away from the woman who gave birth to me. Now that I'm 21, I sometimes catch myself looking in the mirror and wondering how much of her madness is in my blood. Lately, I've been thinking about going to see her, but I don't know if I'm brave enough to face the person who is both my mother and my life's greatest nightmare. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. MHS crossed over 10,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 50,000 in 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community, let's grow this together. Now, back to the stories.
My husband and I moved into a house in the suburbs of New Jersey last December. We had been searching for a quiet place to settle down after years of renting in the city. This house was perfect. 3 bedrooms, a spacious backyard, and an affordable price. My husband, a corporate employee, negotiated skillfully to get this rate. But that perfection was shattered when a foul odor appeared inside the house after the first week. At first, it was just a faint metallic smell. I thought it might be old plumbing or unshoveled garbage. But after a few days, the smell became so strong that I had to open every window in the house. I checked the sewage system, the trash cans, and the kitchen cabinets, but couldn't find the source. My husband was busy with work, rarely home, so he didn't truly grasp the severity of the problem. Since I didn't know anyone in the neighborhood yet, I decided to look for help online. I posted on a local community forum. I described the odor, and in my haste, I naively revealed my exact address. The reaction was faster than I expected. Within an hour, there were over 20 comments, but no one offered useful advice. Instead, they told the history of the house. 3 years ago, a brutal murder had occurred here. A man had murdered his wife and young son and buried the bodies in the backyard. The crime was discovered months later when neighbors reported a strange smell. Many on the forum suspected that there might still be remains left in the ground, or that the odor was a sign of something worse. I closed my laptop, my hands trembling. Did my husband know about this? I decided not to tell him immediately and to find out more first. A few days later, I discovered a strange man living in the shed in the backyard. He introduced himself as Terry, a homeless man who had squatted there since before we moved in. He said he wasn't harming anyone. He just needed shelter for the winter. I looked at him in his dirty clothes and heavy body odor and thought this was the source of the stench. I told my husband about Terry. At first, he was angry, saying he would go out and chase the man away himself. But then, perhaps seeing my anxiety, he decided to call the police. They came and took Terry away gently. The officer told me that homeless people often shelter in abandoned or sparsely occupied houses, and we should lock the shed door more securely. As expected, the heavy body odor vanished, but after a few days, a faint, almost rotten, fishy smell still lingered in the hidden corners. It wasn't horrific, but enough to keep me awake. The odor problem wasn't truly solved. Eventually, I told my husband about the 3-year-old murder case that happened in the house. After some discussion, and wanting complete peace of mind from the shadow of the past, we decided to hire a priest to perform an exorcism. The priest walked around the house, sprinkled holy water, and read prayers. After that, the odor seemed to be completely swept away. I thought it was over, and I could start enjoying the new house. Afterward, I also got to know a woman named Maya, who lived nearby. She was a few years younger than me, friendly, and often came to visit. We had coffee together and chatted about life in the new neighborhood. Maya made me feel less lonely on the days my husband was at work. A peaceful week passed. Then the stench returned. This time it was much stronger and fiercer, as if something was decomposing right inside the house. In addition, the power in the house began to cut out for unknown reasons. Electricians came to check, but they found nothing wrong with the system. The smell caused me constant nausea. I started feeling dizzy. One afternoon when my husband was at work, the power suddenly went out completely. I went to his office to check the circuit breaker. As soon as I walked in, an unusually cold draft and the strongest, most pungent odor hit me. It led me to a large cabinet placed against the wall. I'd never noticed that cabinet before. It looked like a regular file cabinet, but when I touched it, I realized it was a deep freezer. Why would my husband need this in his office? I observed it for a moment longer and then decided to open it. Inside, I saw a small object wrapped in a clear plastic bag. I stared at it for a few seconds before my brain processed the image. It was a baby, pale skin, eyes closed. I backed away, slamming the freezer lid shut. I ran out of the room, into the bathroom, and vomited everything in my stomach. My mind was spinning with hundreds of questions. Who was that child? Why was it there? And most importantly, did my husband know about it? I sat on the bathroom floor, taking almost 10 minutes just to try and control my breathing and the nausea. My reason told me to run immediately and call the police. But a crazy part of me wanted to know all the horrible truth. Finally, I returned to the office, my hands still shaking. I opened my husband's computer, searching for anything that could explain the situation. I found a text file. Inside was a list, names of several women with dates, and brief notes. I read each line. There were 5 names, and the last one, the most recent, clearly read, Maya, August 2nd, pregnant. Pregnant? Maya was pregnant? I remembered her visits, how she asked about my husband, about his work schedule. I thought she was just being curious, but now I understood she was tracking him. Or maybe she was trying to pressure him through me. I reread the list. 5 names, 5 women. If the baby in the freezer belonged to one of them, what happened to the others? All the pieces started fitting together. The initial stench might have been from a body before he bought the freezer. When the smell returned, it was because the power outages caused the freezer to malfunction, and the infant's body began to decompose. Everything started to make horrifying sense. He chose this house not because it was cheap, but because of its dark history. If anyone found something suspicious, people would blame the curse or the lingering remains from the old case. He had calculated everything from the start. I sat there looking at the computer screen with the list of names. I knew that if I confronted him, I would be in danger. My reason told me to act as if nothing had happened. I closed the computer, wiped away any traces. I wiped down the freezer, ensuring it looked untouched. I needed to get out of here before my husband came home. I took my phone and texted him in a casual tone. I feel better now. Going out to run some errands. He replied immediately with a smiling emoji. I drove out of the neighborhood. I drove far, to a rest stop on the highway, a place with many people and security cameras. I parked the car, walked into the public restroom, and called the state police. Not the local police. I didn't know if my husband knew anyone in that department. I spoke slowly, clearly, providing all the necessary information, and most importantly, there's an infant's body inside that freezer, and my husband is on his way home. The operator asked me to stay in a safe place and not return home. They would send police immediately. I sat in the car and waited. 30 minutes later, my phone rang. A police officer called, confirming they had arrived at the house and arrested my husband. He was trying to move the freezer when they stormed in. They had found the infant's body and were checking the entire house. The officer asked if I could come to the police station to give my statement. I agreed, still shaking. In the following days, I learned more horrific details. The police dug up the backyard and found 2 more infant bodies. They identified some of the women on the list. They were all acquaintances of my husband and had either gone missing or gone silent after becoming pregnant. Maya was also arrested on suspicion of complicity, although she insisted she knew nothing about the bodies. I had lived in that house, right on a mass grave. I had befriended Maya, whom I believed was just a friendly neighbor, but she was either on the list of victims or an accomplice. The level of depravity and calculation of the man I called my husband exceeded any disgusting crime I had ever known. I filed for divorce immediately while he was awaiting trial. I changed my name, sold everything related to that disgusting house, and moved to another state to start a new life. Fortunately, I got out in time, but the psychological wounds are permanent.
I'm Joseph. I'm 31 years old. I got treated for depression in Boston, then came back to my hometown, Lakeland, Florida. My mom died when I was a kid. My dad was my only family, and he spent his whole life farming and had a decent-sized farm back in his hometown. The day I got back, I didn't tell my dad ahead of time to surprise him. As soon as he saw me, he looked shocked and worried. "Joseph, what are you doing here?" "Surprise. I'm done with my treatment, and from now on, I'm gonna live here with you." I put my arm around my dad's shoulder and said, "What? Move back here to live?" My dad blurted out, kinda shocked. I just stared at him for a sec, then he smiled, gave me a pat on the shoulder, but he still looked worried. "You're really gonna trade being a software engineer for this tough farming job?" "I'm good," I told my dad to chill. Right then, some guy walked up to my dad, called him boss, and said the watering was all done. Seeing the confused look on my face, my dad goes, "This is Robert. He runs the planning area. But this is Owen's..." I didn't even get a chance to finish asking. "Owen took off 3 months ago," my dad said, and went right back to work. After walking around, I noticed all the old workers were gone. Maybe they quit as Owen did. I saw on the farm's website that my dad was always hiring, but only people without families, since the work's tough and takes up a lot of time. "But there's enough workers now. Probably more than before," I mumbled. "I'm so stoked to see you back. Relax for a bit. Don't stress about the farm." Dad came in and slapped me on the shoulder, totally catching me off guard. "I'm good, no worries. But why'd all the workers at the old farm quit?" I asked. "That's on them. Don't stress," Dad said as he walked out. The first few days back home, I felt chill with the fresh, cool air. I heard Dad say the farm's eggs sell for a good price because they're high quality, and now they're focusing on cranking up the amount. "Joseph, what's your plan?" Robert yelled, totally scaring me. Morning, Robert. I'm gonna check out the chicken feed warehouse. That's a spot nobody's supposed to go, didn't you know? I was totally thrown off by what Robert said. We'll handle everything else on the farm except this spot. The boss will take care of the chicken food himself. Thanks. Keep doing your thing. I headed over to the orange grove. I only saw my dad at dinner all day. After asking about stuff on the farm a bunch of times and seeing how uncomfortable he was, I stopped asking. One evening, I woke up to a noise, thinking it was a thief, so I jumped up fast and ran to the window to check it out. A dark shadow zipped by, heading toward the farm behind the house. I ran straight to my dad's room. "Dad, looks like someone broke in," I whispered, serious as hell. But my dad wasn't in the room. Where'd he go? Or was that dark shadow actually him? I quietly made my way to the back of the house. The whispering was coming from far off, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. It was Dad and Robert talking in front of the chicken feed area. I was gonna move closer to listen, but those two had already gone inside. Robert straight up said this area was off limits. So what's going on? I stood outside really torn about whether or not to sneak in. I didn't hear anything else coming from inside. After about 10 minutes, the grinding machine kicked on. The sound was low. Maybe Dad had soundproofed it or turned it down. Why grinding chicken feed at this time? I had so many questions and doubts. It was making me feel all restless and uneasy. I slowly pushed the door open to peek in, and after a few seconds, my eyes went wide. My stomach flipped, my throat went dry, and I felt like I was gonna puke. Dad's eyes suddenly shot over to the door where I was standing. I quickly turned around and ran straight to my room, locking the door behind me. The next morning, I booked a flight back to Massachusetts and just shot my dad a text that I was in Boston, but I was actually in New Bedford. I'm back in the psych ward again. Every night, I dream about the blade slicing into human skin, the sound of it tearing and crushing, mixed with that cold, mechanical noise. The bright red liquid sprayed out, splashing all over the machine and leaving these long, gross streaks. The crushed bits of flesh, skin, and bones got all messed up into small pieces, slowly sliding down the conveyor belt. The awful scene in front of me and the fear just hit me to my core. Owen and the old workers didn't quit. They got eaten by the chickens. It wasn't just them. It was a bunch of others too. What do I do now? Snitch on my own dad?
Back when I was 9, like 20 years ago, I spent Christmas with my uncle's family out on his farm in Terlingua, Texas. I moved in with my grandma after my parents split up. Even though I didn't have a whole family, I still had plenty of love from other relatives like my uncle. My uncle's second son was 2 years younger than me, and we were pretty close. I was pretty much jumping for joy when my grandma said I could stay there for Christmas. After we finished the awesome turkey dinner my aunt made, my cousin and I hung up 2 stockings with our wishes and names stitched on them, right on the Christmas tree. "Can I stay up till Santa shows up to say thanks, Mom?" my cousin asked my aunt-in-law. "No, sweetie. A good kid who gets presents doesn't stay up late, right?" My aunt-in-law was always sweet about it. "What about you, Finn? What'd you write to Santa?" my aunt-in-law suddenly asked, kind of startling me. "It's a secret," I whispered. My aunt-in-law just smiled and led me and my brother back to our room. Honestly, I just stuffed a blank piece of paper in my sock. I wasn't young enough anymore to fall for those stories adults tell. But back then, I was really trying hard to believe Santa was real. That night, I couldn't sleep. Maybe I had too much hot chocolate.
Or maybe it was my cousin. Her snoring was absolutely awful. After lying there a while, I went to the bathroom, hoping I'd feel comfortable enough to sleep. When I got back from the bathroom and headed to the living room, I saw a dark shadow pass by the window, and I just froze for a few seconds. Is Santa really coming? What time is it? I was curious, so I went to open the window and stuck my head out. The cold wind hit me like a slap, waking me right up. I looked around the big yard to the left of the house, and there was nothing weird, just the sound of some families still partying. I couldn't take the cold anymore, so I shut the window, shivering and covered in goosebumps. Just as I was about to head back to my room, a loud noise startled me. Beavis? I figured my cousin was awake, but there was no answer. As I got closer to the bedroom, it was all quiet, and Beavis's snoring was still going strong. I quietly tiptoed the last few steps to the bedroom. The noise happened again, then a bunch more, so I stopped and looked at the window again. Santa Claus? I shouted when I saw red and white shadows zip by. I rushed over to the window to check if what I was thinking was real, and then I saw something that would haunt me for life. It was totally Santa Claus, wearing that classic bright red coat, but his white beard was splattered with red, and each drop was slowly dripping down. In his hand was a big shiny knife, and red drops were dripping from the blade, making stains on the white snow. There was another man, his face all messed up, covered in red, and he looked absolutely terrified. The man was kneeling in front of Santa, shaking with fear and pain. The man's hands were gripping his stomach so tight that they were covered in red, and every breath was coming out all labored and wheezy. Then he tried to get away, looking for a way out, but his movements slowly faded and eventually just stopped. Santa Claus, no, the killer, looked down at the man who was dying, and a creepy smile crept across his face. He reached out and brushed his cheek like it was some kind of final sick joke. Then he finished him off with a deadly stab. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I was gonna explode. My stomach was doing flips, and I was feeling super nauseous, but I just couldn't look away from what was happening. That Santa totally saw me when he walked away. I wanted to scream and run to find my uncle and aunt, but my legs felt frozen, like I couldn't move at all. Santa looked at me and slowly lifted his bloody finger to his lips, like telling me to be quiet. I was frozen in place for a sec. My whole body felt numb, not from the cold, but from the fear that just took over me. Santa just took off, and I was standing there, not even sure how long it took before I just crumpled to the floor. I crawled back to my room, pulled the blanket over me, and I was still shaking like crazy. I couldn't get a wink of sleep that night. The next day, when the whole fam got together to open up the gifts Santa supposedly brought, everyone was all hyped, especially my cousin. Me? I still couldn't shake off the nightmare from last night. Plain, sweet, Beavis yelled, all pumped when he got his gift. Come on, Finn, open your present, my aunt-in-law said with a smile. I knew this was the gift my uncle and aunt-in-law got for me, not Santa. Santa was busy with other stuff last night, I mumbled. Huh? What'd you say? My aunt asked, but I dodged it real quick. Go check if Santa's got anything else to say to you guys, my uncle said to me and Beavis. Did Santa leave a message? Beavis said, all surprised, and then started digging around in the stocking. No way, he shouted when he spotted a red note. May my handsome boy Beavis be a healthy kid. Handsome boy, that's the nickname only you use for me. This is Santa's message just for you. My uncle shot Beavis a glare, looking all annoyed, then turned to me and said, You gotta keep this to yourself. After lunch, I headed back to my room and pulled out the note from my pocket. Keep it a secret. The letters were super bold, like a serious reminder. I crumpled up the note, squeezed it in my hand, and just started crying. The next day, I asked if I could go back to my grandma's, and that was the last time I saw my uncle and aunt-in-law. I totally dodged their questions. I just couldn't face them. I've never forgotten that. Like the fear and all made me totally hate Christmas and just want to hide away. This Christmas, I met Alita. She's the last missing piece that made my life feel complete. Alita said she hated Christmas too. Santa Claus killed my dad. I saw it all happen, but I couldn't do a thing. So, Alita and I just stuck together through that crazy night. But I know who did it, and Alita doesn't. I posted this story on Reddit because I wanted to share it and get some advice. I'm totally freaking out and scared. One afternoon, after cleaning up every corner of my room, I randomly found a diary with my name on it. I'm not going to tell you my real name. Just call me Mia. I was so stoked, like I just found a bunch of cash. So I could figure out what went down before I turned 12, because I don't remember a thing. I'm writing this down because if I lose my memory, this'll be proof to throw my mom under the bus in court. What was that? I read that line again, and it was stuck in the last line of the first page, in red ink instead of blue. Then, I flipped the diary over and checked out the owner's name again. It was me, my name. To figure out the answers to the questions in my head, I started reading the diary closely. May 13th, 2007. I was 7 back then. I am super sad. It was the first time I saw my parents fighting. I don't get why, but I saw my dad crying after my mom left. June 22nd, 2007. Today, while I was playing store with my best friend, I needed some paper, so I dashed into my parents' room to grab some. I saw on my mom's computer screen, death benefit. I don't really get it. It's like death, but why do I get benefits? After reading all this, my mind was all over the place. July 18th, 2007. Dad hasn't been home for 2 days, and I miss him so much that I called him up. Dad promised to get me a princess doll when he gets back, and I can't wait. After dinner tonight, I heard Mom talking, and I was sure it was Dad, so I happily ran over. But nope, he was super creepy. Mom said he was Dad's friend. August 30th, 2007. Dad's home. This morning, Mom made breakfast for the whole family, and she and Dad were laughing together. I saw Mom make 3 plates of food. Then she added spices to one, but not the other 2. Dad probably likes his food spicy. September 2nd, 2007. Dad passed away. I miss him so much. I cried when I read this. I didn't have any memories of Dad, but now it's different. I looked up at the bookshelf, grabbed all the dolls off it, and hugged them tight to my chest. There's gotta be at least one of them that Dad gave me, or maybe all of them. September 25th, 2007. Since Dad passed away, that man Mom said was Dad's friend has been coming around a lot more, and I really don't like him. Today, I even heard Mom and him talking about taking me to the doctor. I'm in good shape, right? That was the last day I wrote in this diary. I guess I got taken to the doctor, and all my memories from before I turned 12 were taken away by him. I grew up knowing barely anything about my dad passing away. I lived with my mom and stepdad. I don't know if it was really my mom anymore, or if it was the devil inside her. Writing this on Reddit, I cried a ton, not knowing how to deal with everything. Looks like the next one in Mom and Stepfather's plan is Grandma, and then it's me. I guess I got some serious insurance. I wonder if that's enough to make Mom happy. She took care of me for a long time. I gotta get Grandma away from these evil people. Even though I thought about calling the police, like calling the police on my own mom, I just can't do it. Updating the comments, I saw someone gave me an advice. You should totally take Grandma away tonight, Bethany. Head to the police station and report what happened. I was super scared, so I was at Grandma's house, locking all the doors. I thought I got caught. That person knew my real name, and I never told anyone. It seemed like Mom. My mom sent a bunch of missed calls and messages for 3 hours asking where I was. I didn't dare to answer or pick up the phone. I was scared, so I hugged my grandma tight and cried a lot. She was old and weak, just could only get around in a wheelchair. Maybe my mom lured me and my grandma out at night to easily take us out. My brother has returned after 4 years of being missing, and I'm about to get into big trouble. 4 years ago, my brother went missing right after graduating from university. A handsome university student with excellent academic performance, a clean personal life, and a beautiful girlfriend who has been with him for 5 years. That's my brother in the eyes of everyone. But in my eyes, he is sick, ugly, and insane. He always thinks he's right and forces all of his thoughts on me. That perfect appearance deceives everyone, even our parents. If he's upset, I will definitely get beaten, even if it has nothing to do with me. He may look clean and elegant, but he can go on a whole week without showering, instead bathing in cologne. If he likes my food, he'll just eat it without even asking for permission. If he remembers, he'll leave a few small pieces. Otherwise, he'll eat everything up. The day he went missing, I actually felt happy, though I knew that wasn't right. But my life became much more peaceful, a lot more peaceful. My mother was in agony and utter desperation. My mother devoted all her time, energy, and the family's money to search for him by any means necessary. His belongings in the shared room were not allowed to be changed, even in the slightest detail. Over time, the police, the FBI, and both my father and I gradually lost hope, but my mother did not. My mother always believed that one day her beloved son would return. When investigating my brother's relationships, the police found them to be very complex. That perfect boy had many conflicts with his classmates from high school and even college, but they all had alibis in the case of his disappearance. My house is located in a rather sparse area next to the edge of the forest. The local police also deployed all the most modern equipment and methods to search for him, but there were no results. He seemed to have vanished without leaving a trace. For 4 years, I became the sole focus of my family's attention. I grew tall and handsome, just like my brother. Now, I'm 22 years old, the same age my brother was when he went missing. The family is proud of me, but I know that every time my mother looks at me, she remembers him and secretly cries. On his 28th birthday, my brother returned. His appearance hadn't changed much, except for a more mature face. He was still wearing the same clothes he had on the day he went missing. Needless to say, my parents were overjoyed, especially my mother. She couldn't tell whether everything was a dream or reality. My brother was immediately taken to the hospital, for a thorough health checkup. The police were also present to take his statement about everything that had happened, but he was uncooperative and very withdrawn. But he seemed to be doing quite well, and his body showed no signs of injury. My brother has returned after 4 years of being missing, and I'm about to get into big trouble. On the first night he returned home, I couldn't even eat anything at dinner. Before, he used to hate me. Now that he's back with such a sullen personality, he's even more unpredictable. That night, when I went to bed, my brother just sat on the bed staring, making me afraid to even breathe loudly. I lay down under the blanket, unable to sleep in this tense atmosphere. Suddenly, there was a small noise, and I jolted awake, frozen in place. My brother was holding a small knife, pointed directly at me. "Now it's your turn." I immediately ran away, as fast and as far as I could, without having time to call for my parents. My brother chased closely behind me, with the knife still pointed straight ahead. His face was cold and expressionless, his eyes wide open and not blinking even once. I felt like I was running far away from the Grim Reaper's Sith. I ran into the forest, not knowing how long I had been running, until my 2 feet were deformed and mangled. I stopped in front of a deep abyss, and at that moment, I felt an excruciating pain in my feet spreading throughout my body. Turning back, my brother had gotten very close. The scene felt very familiar. It had happened 4 years ago. It's just that my position and my brother's have swapped. That night, when I saw him panicking and slipping, I felt a sense of joy. I didn't need to do anything to him. Even if he was found, there would be no evidence for me to fear. I quietly left the knife in its place in the kitchen and lived with that secret for 4 years. I thought I had completed the mission. I woke up, looked around for a long time to realize that I was still alive. Time passed for nearly 2 months. I had slept a long sleep with my body suffering multiple injuries. The police found me at the bottom of the ravine in the forest. Miraculously, I had survived. They were still actively investigating the cause and the perpetrator. I told my parents to immediately stop the investigation. Although they were very confused, they followed my insistence. I asked my parents about my brother. They said he had left and would contact us later. The fear, pain, and despair he felt 4 years ago, I have now experienced as well. I wonder how he managed to survive. Will he return and forgive me? I found out that my grandfather, my dad, and the devil were actually the same person. I'm Melvin, and I'm 17. I've lived with my grandparents and Aunt Sam since I was little, and I've never met my parents. I've always felt loved by my grandmother and Aunt Sam, but not by my grandfather. I feel like there's always been a gap between me and my grandfather that just can't be closed. He's never really shown me any words of care or loving gestures. When I was 10, I used to run home from the bus stop all excited. The sound of kids crying left me feeling really confused. When I walked into the living room, I saw my grandmother holding a baby wrapped in a blanket, and she was crying too. "Come here, Melvin. This is your little brother, Henry." I was really curious. As a 10-year-old, I had a lot of questions, like why I suddenly had a younger brother, and whether he was born by our mother, Carrie.
You're not allowed to ask questions that go against any instructions from adults.
My grandfather's voice sounded really annoyed when he heard my questions. Aunt Sam quickly pulled me over to see my brother. but I was in tears because I felt sorry for myself and didn't really feel anything for Henry. I stayed in the room that my grandmother said was my mom's room, and Henry stayed with my grandparents since he was too young. I asked my grandmother about my parents many times, but she just smiled with a red, tearful face. My grandmother always told me to keep the room just as it was, down to the smallest details. The picture showed a very young and beautiful woman, and my grandmother said that that was my mother, Carrie. I don't have any information about my father, and neither do my grandparents. I don't share many traits with my mother, but resemble my grandfather more, and I really don't like that. I've had insomnia since I was a kid, probably around 7 or 8 years old, because of all the different noises. Sometimes it was the laughter of kids, and other times it was the crying and scolding. I could never quite pinpoint where it was coming from. I told my grandmother everything because she always listened to me.
Stop making up stories and asking for things.
My grandfather's voice sounded annoyed when he overheard me telling my grandmother that the room needed better soundproofing. My grandmother didn't have much of a say in the house because she didn't work. The whole family relied on my grandfather's salary for all the expenses. I saw my grandfather get angry with her many times, even throwing away the dinner she had just made because she mentioned my mother. She wanted him to spend some money to hire a detective to find my mother, Carrie. My grandfather didn't seem to care about my mother, so I could kind of understand why he didn't show much love for my siblings and me. Because I was really afraid of my grandfather and didn't want to cause any trouble for my grandmother, I tried to put up with those noises for many years. Sometimes, hearing the laughter of the kids made me laugh too. I also have a younger brother, Henry, but we always had to follow my grandfather's strict rules, so we were all pretty closed off. As I grew up, I always planned to visit my mother and ask her why she didn't bring my brothers and me along, or why she never came to visit us. One day, the family dinner took a serious turn when my grandfather announced that he was at risk of losing his job. At night, I heard the two adults arguing about money and some illness, along with the sound of a child crying. I put a pillow over my ears, but I couldn't block out the annoying noise. It sounds like it's Grandpa. I sat up and walked around the room, trying to find a spot where I could hear the noise as clearly as possible. The woman's scream was really loud, and then the argument stopped. I had a lot of doubt about the man's voice. For almost a week now, the noise I've been hearing every night is a mix of a child crying and a woman's soothing voice. Of course I can't sleep. The child's crying might mean they're uncomfortable or sick. I know this from seeing my grandmother take care of Henry when he was little. She gently held Henry, comforted him, and sang him a lullaby with a worried and tired expression. A noise that sounded like a door opening came from right outside. I quietly went to open the door, and it was my grandfather. He must be thirsty. I figured that since there was a bathroom in my grandparents' bedroom, he wouldn't use the one in the living room. I followed him down to the living room, and instead of turning right to go to the kitchen, my grandfather turned left. I kept a safe distance so he wouldn't notice me, and kept following him. My grandfather went into the basement. I waited until he was inside, then I hurriedly followed him. But by the time I got to the basement, my grandfather had disappeared. I walked around looking for him but couldn't find him, and I started wondering if I was dreaming. I decided to sit in a hidden corner and wait, and eventually I fell asleep. The sound like a lock made me jump awake. I was surprised when my grandfather appeared out of nowhere and left the basement. I didn't tell my grandmother, but decided to keep an eye on my grandfather for a few more days. For the next 3 days, my grandfather didn't do anything out of the ordinary and didn't go to the basement again. I was tormented by the sound of a little girl crying and the woman's constant cursing. In her scolding and cursing, she mentioned Mark, my grandfather. I grew more and more curious about my grandfather and was sure he was hiding some kind of secret. On the fourth night, I saw my grandpa pulling back a shelf in the basement, and it opened up to another basement behind it. While I was still in shock, my grandpa led a woman holding a little girl, and they both ran out of the basement in a hurry. The woman's face looked a lot like my mom's. I didn't really react, and I'm not sure what I was feeling at that moment. I just stayed in that corner of the basement until the next morning. The police, along with my grandparents, Aunt Sam, and the woman who looked like my mom, came back. With the police urging him on, my grandpa reopened the door to the other basement. 4 more people came out one by one, all calling the woman Mom and my grandpa Dad. My grandmother immediately collapsed and gasped. I ran over to hug her, and everyone was surprised. The strange woman looked at me, burst into tears, and called my name. The whole truth about my parents, the 2 people I had been longing to see for 17 years, was finally revealed. The noises I heard every night were from my mom and my siblings, who had been living in a dark, cramped basement. My mom had been imprisoned for 24 years by her own father, someone I didn't know whether to call Dad or Grandpa. I had 7 siblings in total. It should have been 8, but one of them died because my mom was abused while she was 7 months pregnant. My grandfather took Henry and me upstairs because the basement was too cramped and told us that my mom had abandoned us. I can't forgive the person who committed this terrible crime, but he did create my 7 siblings. Mother Carrie endured extreme physical and mental pain. Even though she hated the person who took away her future and happiness, she always said that she loved and protected all of us at all costs. I love my mom and my other siblings a lot, for I'm the lucky one. I've decided to move on and live a new, happy life with my grandmother, Mother Carrie, Aunt Sam, and my 6 siblings. But I never stopped wondering why my grandfather did such horrible things to his own daughter. The story is based on a real-life event about the tragic life of a girl named Elizabeth Fritzl. Her real dad is Joseph Fritzl, a messed up, creepy guy. He started abusing his daughter Elizabeth when she was just 11. When Elizabeth was growing up, she tried to run away from her monster of a dad a bunch of times, but it never worked. For 7 years, starting when Elizabeth was 11, Joseph started working on turning the basement into a prison. On August 28, 1984, when Elizabeth was only 18, he drugged her and locked her up in the dark basement. He raped her every day, and after 24 years, Elizabeth had 7 kids with him, going through unimaginable pain and humiliation. In April 2008, Joseph finally let his oldest daughter, Kristen, who was really sick, go to the hospital. From there, the truth came out, and the whole world saw the face of a monster.
I'm Ryan, 17 years old, living with my parents in Arizona. I have a passion for the gym. My father is my inspiration. My dad designed a fairly large room full of exercise equipment at home. Dad has an admirably toned body at the age of 58. My mother is quite young, 13 years younger than my father. Mom doesn't like to exercise but prefers skin caring and follows a strict diet. I'm very proud to have parents with outstanding and youthful appearances. But I have nothing in common with them, except for my mother's blue eyes. I don't care too much about this. After all, I'm quite handsome according to everyone's compliments. In my father's practice room, there's a wooden shelf containing many medals of large and small awards from gymmers. The top position in the middle of the wooden shelf is a picture of my mother when she was young. But in that photo, my mother has brown eyes. In my mother's room, there's also a very strange picture of a woman. I have never met her before. She's very beautiful, short brown hair and blue eyes like me and my mother. I witnessed several times my mother clutching that photo and crying, looking at her in so much pain and torment. I asked my mother about the photo of that woman. She just smiled at me and did not answer. After many times like that, I didn't ask about that woman anymore. My parents rarely show affection to each other. They respect each other's private space. They have a lot of love for me, but in two completely different ways. Outside of studying, I enjoy playing music and exercising in the gym. Everything was very normal until the last month. Every time I step into the gym, it feels cold and gloomy, a feeling I've never had before. At first, I didn't pay too much attention to it, nor did I tell my dad about it. Until recently, a series of scary events that happened caused me unable to ignore it anymore. The first time was when I practiced at 9 p.m. I went into the room and turned on the lights and warmed up thoroughly. I started the workout by jogging, but as soon as I stepped on the treadmill, the light in the room suddenly turned off. Power blackouts in the area where I live are quite rare. Looking into the next room, the electricity was still on. I thought the light bulb was broken. But when I got close to the switch, it was in the off state. I turned my hand on the switch and the light came back on. At that time, I did not have any doubts or feelings of fear. I continued the training session and finished at 11 a.m. The second time was also when I was alone in the gym. It was around 10 p.m. I'm doing shoulder raises using resistance bands. Suddenly, the song I was playing turned off, and a few seconds later, a child's giggling voice froze the blood in my veins. The laughter was so loud and haunting, I shivered and got goosebumps. About 5 seconds later, the laughter disappeared. My music continued playing. I stopped the exercise, went to drink water, wiped my sweat to calm down, wondering whatever just happened was real or I was hallucinating. That day I finished my homework early. I didn't tell my parents about those two strange encounters because they would be so unbelievable. The third time it was not at night, but around 4 p.m. It was the weekend, so I spent time practicing earlier than usual. I improved my exercises with barbells. Lying down to lift weights, I feel like it's much heavier, even though my weight remains the same. After lifting it about 4 times, my mind started to feel dizzy and ringing in my ears. I closed my eyes lightly and then opened them to regain consciousness. When I opened my eyes, I brought the weight down at the same time. From the horizontal bar of the dumbbell, a woman hung, her long hair hanging down, her big eyes wide open, her mouth wide open, filled with blood. In her arms, she held a crying newborn baby. The woman pressed her terrifying face close to mine. Her loud scream and the child's cry hurt my ears. I was startled and screamed loudly, unable to control the strength in my arms. The dumbbell pressed hard on my chest, making it difficult to breathe. At that moment, the woman also disappeared. I braced myself, used all my remaining strength to place the dumbbell on the support bar and sat up, clutching my chest and panting. It took a few minutes to calm down. I was about to get up and go to my room. Accidentally, I looked at my mother's photo on the wooden shelf. Mom looked at me,
her unfamiliar brown eyes filled with anger and resentment. I was startled to remember the woman's face just now. She looks a lot like my mother, but it's the mother in the picture. I went into the bathroom and poured cold water down really hard to really wake up. Running to my parents' room, I wanted to tell them about the horrors I had experienced, but just as I approached the door, I heard two people arguing.
You are the one who killed my wife and son. You even destroyed your own face just to be here.
I was so shocked. I rooted to the spot, listening to every bitter word my parents said. It turned out that the woman with blue eyes in the picture in my mother's room was my mother's real face. So what about me? What is my true identity?
My name's Richard, 35 years old. I'm working for a construction company, major in structural engineering. 2 years ago, I was assigned to researching on a dismantle of a building. It's a building in the outskirt of the city, in the eviction area. The building was large and very sturdy, constructed some 15 years earlier. In order to dismantle it safely, I'd need to study the site in order to calculate the amount of explosive used and in which area so the collapse would be at the least risks. My supervisor had greenlit on the permission to stay in the building and facilitate the structural study. The day I moved in, 2 tenants welcomed me in, a mother and son. The mother name's Kate, 66 years old, and her son Jim, 41 years old. They lived here for a long time and seemed to understand the building very well, even providing me with very detailed structural maps. Jim was pretty gentle and polite, while Kate, in stark contrast, was rather rude and seemed to ignore me at every turn. My accommodation was a room on the 3rd floor. I scoured the entire building, and I'd admit this house architecture was really strange. Advancing to the 2nd floor, the walls were sunken down with a strange cave-in, about 6 feet high, 3 feet wide, and about 1 foot sunken in. Within the sunken part hung a bundle of roses. I came closer to take a better look, man. The wall there was like at least 3 feet. I asked Jim about this disparity and why no one bothered fixing it. He just smiled softly. That's where my dad passed away when the building came down to the final phase. An accident, and he's buried in the cement. I was really shocked at his revelation, while Jim wasn't so thrilled about it. Moving up to the 3rd floor, I asked Jim further about the architecture and the building blueprints. As far as I was told, the architecturer who designed this building is Christopher, a rather famous one in the field. Jim told me that 15 years ago, Christopher had vanished without a trace. All police attempts came up empty-handed, and all of them agreed that Christopher left behind a rather mysterious building that even them couldn't crack it. Jim told me about Christopher's old room in the highest floor and told me that this room was off-limit. I agreed and returned to my room, starting with the instruments and study of the basic layout. However, in the evening when I was taking a shower, I could hear sounds coming from behind the glass. However, upon checking everything, I couldn't find anything unusual at all. At night when I sleep, that sound once again rang out. It felt kinda like someone's calling me or calling for help. Later the following morning, I went downstairs and met Kate in the kitchen. I asked her whether there was anyone else residing in the building and was told that the 3 of us was the only residents here. After breakfast, I began my observation to mark up the foundations for demolition. When I made my way to the highest floor, I remembered Jim's order, but I was curious, so I ventured further into Christopher's old room. There was a lot of architecture books there, and quite a few personal stuffs that weren't coated in dust at all, as if it had been regularly used. I was rummaging through the stuffs until a voice boomed from behind me. "You just forgot what I've told you already." Jim stood in the doorway, looking at me, smiling. Yet I felt so uneasy by that smile. I told him that I just wanted to look for additional information of the building that would help in my survey. After leaving the room, I felt very strange about Jim. When I was strolling on the second floor hallway, I saw Kate standing facing the wall that her husband died on. She brought over a fresh bundle of roses, hands over the deflated area. She must have missed her husband dearly. After realizing my gaze upon her, she threw back her cold gaze upon me. She demanded I stop all demolition attempts, because she'd rather die in the house rather than seeing it demolished. I could have no way to console her about it. After all, it's what I had to do. That night I went to bed rather late, yet suddenly I heard someone wailing and begging. Walked out of the room, I was surprised to know that it was Kate. She was kneeling and crying on the deflated wall commemorating her husband's demise. She begged him not to come back for her anymore. The pain in her voice made me shudder. I thought there's some crazy secrets that was hidden in this very household. At night, I woke up due to a sudden sense of cold, enough to make me shiver. When I was able to open my eyes, I realized that I was locked up in a very tight space, with slippery walls surrounded. I was in full panic, slammed hard on the walls and screamed aloud, hoping for someone's attention. Suddenly the ceiling opened up, came over with blinding white light shining down upon me. A shadow appeared, quietly looked down upon me, despite my ceaseless pleading for help. That shadow didn't say anything, but just pouring down a thick substance. Only when it came and touched me that I realized it was all cement. The caustic wet cement seemed to have eating through clothes and body. The pain was unbearable, and I could only scream and hope it would go away. Until the moment the cement rose overhead and the substances streamed through all my orifices. It was until that I jolted completely awake, the caustic taste still linger in my mouth. It was all just a bad nightmare, and thanks to that, I was unable to go back to sleep. Later that morning, I sneaked back to Christopher's room to search for additional information relating to this household. Before I was able to come in, I realized the room was occupied. It was Jim. He's rather, verse around this part of the house. Jim went to the corner of the room and pushed on some hidden furniture there, revealing a large hole within. I carefully marked the location in my memory to avoid Jim's detection. A few days later, I tried to act as normal as I could in front of the two tenants. Every location for demolition charges and building foundations had been made and mailed back to the company's headquarters for processing. Kate was becoming more and more cold and rude, while Jim was acting rather relaxed. On my last day there, I snuck up on the secret chamber in Christopher's workroom when everyone had fallen asleep. It was a rather small, dampened place with 2 observation holes carved out into my bedroom and bathroom. So, Jim had always kept me under his watch from the start. When I was deep in my thought, I saw Jim sneaking to my bedroom, a sharp knife on his hand. He slowly made his way to my bed, swinging it high. He swiftly lifted up my sheet for a strike, but then stopped when couldn't see me there. Those actions were in stark contrast with the gentle smile that man often wore on his face. It was when I realized that Jimmy Guy was no joke. He's truly a serial killer, hidden in plain sight. Jim angrily stormed to the bathroom. After a deep breath, he quickly ran out of the room. I knew where he's heading and placed myself accordingly. Right across Christopher's room, I could hear raging footsteps getting closer and closer. So I did the only logical thing I could, closed the door shut and locked it from behind. The door suddenly bulged up by strong impacts. Okay, that guy was really into me now. I thought, braced myself in the short corner behind the door. Open up! This is the police. Hearing that, I knew that I would be safe and opened up the door to the authority. So as a precaution, I called the police before venturing here to this door. Now safe, I could see the police arresting Mrs. Kate and Jim. Initial diagnosis concluded that he's suffering a serious case of schizophrenia. When the building was manually dismantled, workers there discovered a small hidden section right behind my room. In there was a dying old man. That was Christopher. After recovery, he told that he was the grandfather of Jim. That twisted man had buried his own father alive in concrete, and I legally imprisoned his grandfather for 15 years. I didn't dare to imagine what would become of me if I hadn't alerted the police before going to the room.
My boyfriend won't let me eat anything except what he makes. Me and Lewis have been together for over a year. We've got a sweet relationship, going through all the ups and downs like any other couple. Lewis is super picky. Every single thing I eat has to be made by him. But honestly, I'm cool with it. One time he got home late from work, and instead of making him deal with cooking, I went ahead and made dinner myself. He came back super mad, grabbed the pan off the stove, and tossed the food I was cooking straight in the trash. Lewis yelled, "I'm telling you one last time, don't cook anything else." I was shocked. Yeah, my cooking's not as good as his, but he didn't have to act so crazy about it. I didn't talk to Lewis for 3 days after that, but he finally said sorry with a big home-cooked dinner, and we made up. We never go out to eat. We always just cook at home. Lewis won't buy food from the grocery store because he thinks it's from who knows where. He even brings his own food in a bag to company or family parties. A bunch of times, my friends told me to dump Lewis because they thought he was kind of messed up. Everything about Lewis was great, except for his weird eating habits. He was super caring and loyal, so I decided to just roll with it. But the more I tried, the weirder Lewis got. One weekend, he was out from the crack of dawn till late afternoon. He came home with a big bag, and his clothes were all stained with this dark red stuff that I was pretty sure was blood. Lewis said he couldn't trust the meat guy, so he went to the farm and asked the owner to butcher the animals right in front of him. "You're crazy, Lewis," I shouted at my boyfriend. He didn't say anything, just finished up the meat and stashed it in the freezer. That night, the sight of Lewis's bloody clothes and his blank face had me thinking a lot. Looking at my boyfriend next to me, I was like, did he just hit up the meat farm? But then I decided to just ignore where Lewis's meat was coming from. Right before Christmas, Lewis said his parents wanted us over for dinner, but he didn't want to go. But I really wanted to go. I'd never met his parents, and I wanted to ask them about Lewis's weird eating habits. After a whole day of bugging him, Lewis finally said yes. On Christmas Day, we were all set to roll out. I got all dressed up and put together a nice gift basket while Lewis was still in the kitchen whipping up dessert. As we pulled up in front of his house, Lewis kept telling me to only eat the stuff he made. I agreed to make it quick, and we both went into the house to a warm welcome from his parents. They were super classy, friendly, and loaded. During the meal, his parents and I were happily chatting while Lewis was quiet. I felt really rude for constantly turning down the food from his parents. When he stepped out to take a call, I had a little booze in me and totally forgot all about Lewis's rules. I tried the veggie salad while his parents were all happy and excited about it. It was awesome. I totally got where my boyfriend's cooking skills came from. When I asked why he had those weird eating habits, his mom just sighed. "We used to have a maid, but she just vanished." That same day, we found out the food she made was poisonous. I guess that's why she took off. Ever since then, Lewis has been kind of freaked out. He learned to cook and makes all his own food now. I saw how helpless his parents were and just ended up understanding and loving my boyfriend even more. The problem was the booze was getting to me, so I secretly snuck some food from Lewis's parents' place and I definitely couldn't let him find out. The next day, when Louis went to work, I couldn't wait anymore. I grabbed the food his parents gave me last night, heated it up, and dug in. Just as I was almost done eating, I saw something in the food that made me choke. It was a human finger, like the pinky finger to be exact. I screamed and tossed the plate of food right on the ground. I crawled into the bathroom and kept throwing up for an hour until all that was coming up was just this bitter yellow stuff from my stomach. When Louis got back, he rushed over, looking surprised, mad, and helpless. I asked to be taken to the hospital to get all that food out of my system, and Louis jumped right on it. As soon as I got out of the hospital, I asked Louis to take me to the farm where he got the meat, and he totally went along with it, no questions asked. After seeing the whole slaughtering process, I trusted my boyfriend. But after that Christmas, I just couldn't eat meat anymore. Louis looked at me all helpless and said, "Maybe my parents' meat grinder is messed up again."
Mm-hmm.